Beneath the soil, within mountains, and even written in the shapes of the stars, there may lie a story still untold. Not a prophecy of the future, but a memory of the past. Stones arranged with impossible precision, lines that connect temples across continents, symbols that appear in Egypt, Peru, and Indonesia, separated by oceans, yet eerily the same. All of them seem to whisper the same thing, a message left behind by those who came before. I wonder, where are you listening from right now? And what time is it, where you are? Strange, isn't it? We're talking about civilizations thousands of years old. Yet here we are, sharing this tiny moment together, across space and time. Wherever you are, whenever you are, I'm truly grateful that you're here. If you enjoy these slow, thoughtful questions, I'd be deeply thankful if you'd tap the like button or subscribe. It helps this small, drifting signal find its way to other curious souls, people who, like you, still believe the Earth has something left to say. Of course, there's no pressure. Just an invitation, a faint footprint in the dust. And if you look closely enough, it just might lead somewhere unexpected. Part 1. The question beneath our feet. Some questions were never meant to be answered. They were meant to be heard. And one of those questions, echoing softly through the corridors of time, is this: what if we are not the first civilization? It arrives not as a thunderclap, but as a whisper. A quiet unease that stirs whenever we stand before ancient stones, or run our fingers over walls carved by hands long turned to dust. It does not come from disbelief, but from humility, from the subtle realization that the world may have known far more than we have remembered. We've been taught to see human history as a straight line, an upward march of progress. From cave to campfire, from village to city, from empire to skyscraper. It's a proud story, clean and comfortable. But what if that line is an illusion? What if it's only the visible layer of something much deeper, a single chapter in a book we never finished reading? What if the earth beneath our feet is not just our foundation, but the graveyard of forgotten worlds? What if every layer of rock, every grain of sand, is a page in a story we've lost the language to understand? Imagine this. You're standing on a quiet street in any modern city, New York, Rome, Cairo. Beneath the asphalt and concrete lie the ruins of older worlds. Layers of dust, brick, ash, and bone. And deeper still, a silence older than language, where quartz crystals have slept undisturbed for millions of years. Every step you take is a touch upon memory. The ground is not dead, it is remembering. If you close your eyes, sometimes you can feel it. A vibration through the soles of your shoes, a murmur through the roots of trees, a soundless voice telling you that the earth has seen it all. The rise and fall of oceans, the birth of mountains, the twilight of species, and the endless rehearsal of civilizations who believed, as we do now, that they were the first. The earth remembers, not in words, not in books, not in data, but in scars. Volcanoes are memories. Rivers changing course are memories. Layers of silt covering a vanished village, those too are memories. And we who walk upon them are the latest forgetful heirs to a story far older than ourselves. And yet, evidence keeps surfacing. Like the planet occasionally exhales, offering us hints. A carved hilltop in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, 11,000 years old, built before agriculture, before cities, before any known kingdom. Massive pillars carved with animals and cosmic symbols, then deliberately buried by the very hands that raised them. An ancient map showing the coastline of Antarctica, drawn long before we discovered it. Temples across continents, aligned to stars as if part of a single conversation across time. Are these coincidences? or the fragments of a chapter erased from our textbooks? Perhaps, in some distant epoch, there were people, as human as us, as curious, as flawed, who watched the heavens, measured the earth, built with knowledge we can no longer replicate. They lived, they perished, and only echoes remain. The Orthodox scholar says, there is no evidence of an earlier civilization. But another voice, quieter and more dangerous, replies, perhaps the evidence is there, and we have not learned how to see it. The earth, after all, is the ultimate recycler. It swallows and remakes everything. Seabeds become mountains, deserts devour forests, cities sink beneath the waves. Give it a few thousand years, and even the strongest monuments crumble into dust. If an advanced culture had existed tens of thousands or even millions of years ago, could its traces survive the churning of the planet's crust? Probably not. But maybe, just maybe, something small endures. A pattern, a stone alignment, a celestial orientation we still can't explain. What's truly unsettling is not the possibility that others came before us. It's the idea that we might be repeating them. Just like them, we are proud. Just like them, we believe ourselves unique, enlightened, eternal. And just like them, we build higher, faster, louder, convinced our story will never end. But one day, centuries from now, the glass and steel will crumble. Cities will turn to dust, and someone, or something, might stand where you are now, sift through the sediment, and ask, did they ever imagine that they were not the first? When we study history, we don't just look backward, we look inward. This question, are we the first, is not merely archaeological, it's philosophical. It challenges our place in the cosmos and our arrogance in assuming that knowledge only began with us. Because if there were others, intelligent, creative, and lost, then we are not the pinnacle. We are the memory. And memory, like civilization, can be erased. Perhaps that's why we tell stories. Not to preserve the past, but to protect ourselves from forgetting. Every myth, every monument, every fossilized tool is a whisper from those who came before, pleading, remember us and remember yourselves. Sometimes at night, I like to imagine the earth as a conscious being, vast, patient, and quietly observing. It watches us the way an old teacher watches a child, knowing we will make the same mistakes and perhaps learn the same lessons. It doesn't judge. It just waits. Waits to see if we will finally learn to listen, to hear the pulse beneath the noise. And maybe if we are still enough, if we press our hands to the ground and let the silence speak, we might feel it. A deep, slow heartbeat beneath the crust, reminding us that time is not a line, but a circle. That what has been may be again. That creation and destruction are one motion. That we, too, are part of that breathing, living memory. So the story begins, not with discovery, but with a question humble, haunting, and infinite. Could it be that beneath our feet lie the remnants of worlds forgotten? Could it be that we, the modern, the civilized, the digital, are merely the latest echo of something that has happened before? If that's true, then the earth is not merely our home. It is our autobiography. A book we've been writing and losing again and again. And from here, the journey continues. Down into buried temples, drowned coastlines, and the myths that refuse to die. Because sometimes, to glimpse the future, we must first bend down, touch the soil, and listen to the question beneath our feet. Part 2. When the mystery deepens underground. The question has already been asked. What if we are not the first? Now we begin to dig. Not just into the soil, but into the very foundation of what we believe history to be. For generations we've been taught that civilization began in Sumer, the ancient land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. There, around 5,000 years ago, humans supposedly took their first true steps into complexity, inventing writing, building cities, raising kings, creating order from chaos. It was the dawn of everything we call civilized. That was the story, until the earth quietly corrected us. In the hills of southeastern Turkey, beneath layers of wind-blown soil and time, archaeologists uncovered something that simply should not exist. Its name is Göbekli Tepe, the Potbelly Hill. At first glance, it was just another mound, one of thousands scattered across the region. But when excavation began in the mid-1990s, what emerged stunned even the most skeptical scientists. Massive T-shaped pillars, some over 6 meters tall and weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in perfect circles. Reliefs of lions, foxes, boars, snakes, and vultures carved in astonishing detail, alive with motion and meaning. And among them, symbols of the heavens, constellations, the crescent moon, the scorpion, an entire cosmology carved into stone before the first city was ever built. Carbon dating revealed the unthinkable. 11,000 years old. That's 6,000 years before the pyramids, 4,000 years before Sumer, 2,000 years before agriculture. According to everything we thought we knew, it was impossible. Humanity at that time was supposed to be primitive, nomadic hunter-gatherers living in small groups, following herds and seasons. They weren't supposed to have the resources, organization, or imagination to quarry and arrange stones with such scale and precision. And yet there it was. Not only built, but intentionally buried. That single act, the burying of Göbekli Tepe by the very people who built it, may be one of the greatest mysteries in archaeology. Why would anyone hide such a masterpiece? To protect it? To preserve it for the future? Or to seal away something too sacred or too dangerous to be left exposed? Whatever the reason, it suggests consciousness, intention, legacy, a sense that what they were doing mattered, not just for themselves, but for whoever would one day uncover it. Perhaps they even imagined us. And if one site like this could rewrite our understanding of civilization, what else still lies hidden beneath our feet? How many more Göbekli Tepes still sleep under forests, deserts, or oceans? Across the planet, satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar reveal anomalies, geometric shapes beneath jungles in the Amazon, buried mounds in the Sahara, entire city grids off the coasts of India and Japan. Each discovery adds another whisper to the growing chorus. The Earth's surface is only the latest page of a very old book. And the author? The Earth itself, relentless in its habit of erasing and rewriting. Every few thousand years, wind and water reclaim what we build. Jungles digest stone, deserts bury cities, the sea swallows coasts. Given time, even the tallest skyscraper will become dust, and the dust will forget our name. The historian within me resists such thoughts, yet the evidence keeps gnawing at the edges of certainty. When we call something the oldest, what we really mean is the oldest we've found so far. That humility is what Göbekli Tepe teaches us. The map of human history is incomplete, not because the past is lost, but because we have not yet learned where to look. Archaeology at its heart is a dialogue between memory and silence. Every artifact, every ruin, is a word in a language the earth is still teaching us. Sometimes it speaks in clear syllables, a temple, a tablet, a tool. Other times it whispers through absence, through what should be there, but isn't. The gap, the void, the buried emptiness, these too are part of the story. Let us pause and consider the psychology of the builders. Who were these people who carved stone with such devotion, only to cover it up? They must have possessed not only skill but purpose, a worldview in which the stars and the earth were intertwined, where architecture was an act of worship, not power. Perhaps they believed that by shaping the earth in the image of the heavens, they were restoring harmony between the two. And when the time came, when something shifted in the skies or the climate, they buried their temples and walked away, leaving them as offerings to time itself. A message sealed in stone, waiting for a species far in the future to remember. We are that species. If the earth is a master of concealment, then time is its loyal accomplice. It doesn't destroy, it hides. And what it hides, it transforms. Mountains rise, seas recede, rivers carve new veins through continents. What once was sacred land becomes farmland, becomes city, becomes ruin again. And through it all, the planet keeps its secrets. Sometimes I wonder if the ground beneath our feet is less a foundation and more a vault, a vast archive of forgotten dreams, sealed by the weight of centuries. Each discovery, each excavation is a form of resurrection, a brief breath of the past before it's buried again. But perhaps the more profound question is not what lies beneath, but why we keep forgetting. Why does every age believe it is the first? Why does memory fade, not just from the planet, but from us? Maybe forgetting is the price of renewal. Maybe each civilization, like a forest after fire, must burn and regrow, not as punishment, but as rhythm. If that is true, then Göbekli Tepe is not merely an archaeological site. It is a mirror. A reflection of ourselves, of what we might leave behind when the cycle turns once more. And it will turn. It always does. The same processes that buried ancient temples are already at work on us. Wind, water, ice, and time. Patient, relentless sculptors. Our skyscrapers, our satellites, our digital towers of Babel, they too will fall. And the earth, indifferent but not cruel, will press its cool hand over the traces and whisper, "Rest now. I'll keep your memory safe." In that sense, the ground is not our enemy but our archivist. It doesn't erase, it curates. Beneath every step we take lies the museum of all that ever was, unvisited, unlit, but not forgotten. The question is, will we ever learn to read its script? So when I stand among the carved stones of Göbekli Tepe, I don't see the past. I see continuity. I see human hands steady and deliberate, guided by wonder. I see minds that measured the stars long before telescopes, hearts that sought meaning long before modern religion. And I realize that our ancestors were not primitive. They were profound. They knew what we are only beginning to remember, that the earth itself is alive, and that every act of creation leaves a resonance that never truly fades. Perhaps that's why they buried their temple. Not to hide it, but to ensure it would survive, hidden from wind, war, and vanity, sleeping in silence until we were wise enough to find it again. It was not a tomb, but a time capsule, a deliberate message across epochs, and when we unearthed it, the message read, "You are not the beginning." It's a humbling thing to realize that our species, so obsessed with innovation, may simply be remembering. That what we call discovery might just be rediscovery. That progress may, in truth, be the slow unearthing of forgotten genius. And so, the mystery deepens. Every shovelful of earth, every grain of sand brings us closer to the edges of our own ignorance. The deeper we dig, the older the world becomes, and the smaller we feel. If this is what lies beneath one hill in Turkey, What might still be hidden under the Sahara, under the ice of Antarctica, beneath the black waters off Yonaguni or Malta? The earth is vast, patient, cunning. It reveals itself only when it chooses, and never all at once. As we close this chapter, the question from part 1 returns, now sharpened by evidence. If something advanced once walked this planet before us, would we even recognize their remains? Would their works look like ruins or like mountains? Would their memory be carved in stone or in the stars? Perhaps the real story of humanity is not written on the surface, but buried deep below, waiting for those brave enough to dig not only through the soil, but through the illusion of certainty itself. Because the earth does not speak in years or centuries. It speaks in cycles. And every time we uncover a forgotten temple, a buried city, or a myth that proves to be history, we are not just learning about the past. We are catching a glimpse of our own reflection, half buried in the dust of time. Part 3. The myths that remember. Every civilization begins with a story. And sometimes, the oldest stories are not written on clay tablets or carved into stone. They are whispered through myth. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mil, names that feel more like echoes than facts, drifting fragments of a time before memory. Across continents and oceans, these myths tell the same haunting tale, a golden age followed by a great flood, a world of knowledge and harmony swallowed by the sea, and survivors, a scattered few, who carried the flame of wisdom to the newborn peoples of a wounded earth. To most of modern history, these are legends, comforting, imaginative, but irrelevant. Yet to those who listen more carefully, they sound like something else, not fantasy, but remembrance. The earth, too, carries memory. And when we study her closely, her records begin to align with the ancient stories. At the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened. The planet began to warm with terrifying speed. Glaciers that had buried continents for millennia melted into torrents. Rivers swelled. Oceans rose, not by inches but by hundreds of feet. Entire landscapes vanished. Low-lying plains, once home to early human settlements, were drowned beneath waves. If a civilization had existed along those ancient shorelines, and many would have, their cities would now lie under more than 100 meters of water. The flood myths suddenly seem less like superstition and more like collective trauma. Different tongues, same memory. Different gods, same grief. From the temples of Egypt to the mountains of Peru, from the flood of Noah to the tale of Gilgamesh, from Deucalion of Greece to Manu of India, the pattern repeats. A warning ignored, a deluge unleashed, and a rebirth after the water recedes. Each culture names it differently, but the rhythm is universal. And when patterns echo across such vast distances, across languages and epochs that could never have met, we must ask, are these coincidences, or are they fragments of one story, shattered and scattered, yet still remembering the same event? Under the seas, the evidence seems to whisper the same thing. Off the coast of Japan, near the island of Yonaguni, lie megalithic terraces and staircases descending into the depths. Right angles too perfect, proportions too deliberate to be easily dismissed. In the Mediterranean, near Malta, stone structures rest beneath the waves, eerily similar to the temples found on land. And in India's Gulf of Combat, sonar scans have revealed geometric formations, streets, foundations, even what appear to be walls, buried under silt thousands of years old. Scientists debate, are these geological formations tricks of erosion and light? Or are they remnants of something made by human hands, lost to the rising seas of the post-glacial world. Either way, they spark an unsettling thought. If the water erased an entire chapter of humanity's story, how much have we truly forgotten? When I first saw images of Yonaguni, I remember feeling a strange mixture of awe and melancholy. The ocean shimmered with that quiet, bluish stillness, a silence that only great depths can hold. And beneath it, those massive stones stood like half-awake giants, covered in coral, indifferent to the divers who hovered before them with flashlights and questions. There was a gravity to the place, a sense that the sea wasn't merely water, but memory made liquid. That the ocean itself might be keeping the secrets of those who came before us, sealed beneath its waves as if protecting them from our impatience. The ancients said the sea was the womb of all life. Perhaps it is also the tomb of all history. And what of Atlantis, that great myth that refuses to die? Plato wrote of it not as a fantasy, but as history. A memory handed down through Egyptian priests, describing a vast and powerful island civilization that fell beneath the waves in a single night of fire and flood. For over 2,000 years, scholars have argued over its meaning. Some claim it was allegory, a warning against human pride. Others insist it was real, a recollection of an advanced culture erased at the end of the Ice Age. Neither side can prove the other wrong, but perhaps the truth lies between. Perhaps Atlantis was not one place, but a memory repeated, the shared dream of survivors who fled the rising seas, rebuilding fragments of their lost world wherever they landed. Maybe every ancient civilization, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Maya, carries within it a spark from that earlier fire. And if that's so, then history isn't a straight line at all. It's a circle, an unending cycle of remembrance and forgetting. Modern science tells us that sea levels rose over 400 feet between 20,000 and 8,000 BCE, a cataclysmic transformation that redrew the world map. Imagine the trauma of it. Entire coastlines swallowed, mountains becoming islands, rivers drowning their valleys. For early humanity, the sky itself must have seemed to fall. Can we really expect them not to remember? To forget the sound of the world drowning? It's no wonder that their descendants told stories of gods angry with mankind, of cleansing floods and second chances. Because how else could they make sense of it? When science speaks of glaciers melting, and myth speaks of divine punishment, they are both describing the same thing, a collapse so immense it scarred the human soul. If we strip away the divine metaphors, the moral lessons, the gods and monsters, what remains is strikingly consistent. A great flood, a civilization lost, a handful of survivors who rebuild. And perhaps that's why the myth of Atlantis and others like it refuses to fade. Because deep down, it feels true. Our bones, our instincts, our very DNA remember it. Like a dream from another life we can't quite recall but somehow know was real. Every culture has its own version because every ancestor lived through the same awakening, the day the waters came. Sometimes I think of the world's myths as the Earth's own language of memory, stories encoded in metaphor, carried forward by song, by ritual, by stone. They survive not because they are entertainment, but because they are necessary. They remind us of our fragility. They warn us that nature is not our servant, but our teacher. And they whisper again and again, "This has all happened before." Science tells us what it meant. What makes these myths so compelling is not that they contradict science, but that they complete it. Science tells us what happened. Myth tells us what it meant. Together, they form a fuller truth. The flood was not just water, it was erasure, the destruction of memory, the breaking of continuity. And perhaps in some deep symbolic sense, every human life reenacts it. We are born, we build, we forget, we begin again. The ancients understood that pattern. We, in our modern pride, are only rediscovering it. So as we leave Göbekli Tepe and turn toward the sea, the story widens, from the stones buried under soil to the temples buried under salt, from the carved symbols of the hunters to the sung myths of the survivors. The Earth's memory shifts medium, from rock to water. But the message remains the same. Something great was lost, and it longs to be remembered. And maybe, in the end, that's what myth truly is. Not fiction, not fact, but the bridge between the two. A way for truth to survive the flood. When the camera pulls back and the waves of the world roll endlessly toward the horizon, one can almost hear it, the faint heartbeat of a forgotten age, pulsing beneath the sea. Every tide, every current, every whisper of foam against the rock seems to say, "We were here. We remember." Part 4. The fragility of progress. The floodwaters recede, the myths settle into silence, and in that silence something else emerges, a realization far more unsettling than any lost city beneath the waves. Civilization, we are told, is progress, a steady climb upward, from ignorance to knowledge, from stone to steel, from superstition to science. But what if that story is a comforting illusion? What if civilization isn't a staircase at all, but a tide that rises, recedes, and rises again, each time leaving behind faint traces, scattered bones, shattered monuments, fragments of memory mistaken for miracles. Every empire, every invention, every gleaming monument of modernity, all of it is built upon the sediment of what came before. And like the tide, it will one day retreat, taking us with it. It's a sobering thought, because when we look around at our cities, our satellites, our global networks of glass and metal, we imagine permanence. We build skyscrapers as if they will outlast time itself. We pave continents, light the darkness, pierce the heavens with our machines. And yet, history whispers a quiet warning. Nothing endures. Even the great pyramids, those timeless mountains of stone, are mere blinks in geological time, their edges softening, their faces crumbling, already half devoured by the desert. In a few thousand years, the steel of our bridges will rust, our highways will crumble, our glass towers will collapse into dust. In 10,000 years, forests will reclaim our suburbs. In 100,000, glaciers may erase our names from the land. And in 1,000,000, the earth itself will recycle the bones of our cities into new mountains, new minerals, new worlds. Civilization, for all its brilliance, is as fragile as sand. This truth, quiet, humbling, undeniable, forms the heart of what scientists call the Silurian hypothesis. It asks a question both scientific and poetic. If an industrial civilization had existed millions of years before us, advanced, technological, global, would we even know? At first, the answer seems obvious. Of course we would. Surely there would be ruins, artifacts, bones, something. But then, the deeper you look into the processes of the Earth, the more that confidence begins to crumble. Because the planet is not a museum. It is a living, breathing engine of renewal, a self-cleaning system on geological timescales. Its crust shifts, melts, and reforms. Its oceans grind continents into sand. Its atmosphere corrodes, consumes, and erases. Given enough time, everything disappears. We have trouble imagining deep time. 10,000 years feels long to us, an eternity. But to the earth, 10,000 years is a single breath. 1,000,000 is a heartbeat. 1 billion is a lifetime. On that scale, even the grandest civilizations, ours included, are microscopic flickers in a vast and ancient film. The fossil record, that vast archive of life, preserves so little. Entire species vanish without leaving a trace. Even bones dissolve, crushed under pressure, melted by heat, recycled into stone. So if another civilization once walked this planet, perhaps 50 or 100 million years ago, what would remain? Not their cities, not their machines, not their monuments, only a whisper in the chemistry of rocks, a thin, anomalous layer of carbon, plastic, or metal oxides, a geological scar, a heartbeat in stone. When you hold a piece of shale or limestone, you are touching a page in the planet's diary. Each layer records a chapter, an age of creatures, a climate, a cataclysm. Sometimes those chapters include mass extinctions, sudden spikes in carbon dioxide, rare metals, or radiation. Most are caused by natural events, volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, runaway climate shifts. But once in a while, one can't help but wonder, could such a chemical anomaly, perhaps one deep in the strata, represent something else? A vanished civilization that burned too hot, too fast, and was swallowed before its story could spread? The Silurian hypothesis doesn't claim that happened. It simply asks if we'd even be able to tell if it had. And the answer is almost always the same: no. It is humbling, even haunting, to realize that the Earth forgets as quickly as it creates. That we might be the latest actors in a very old performance, repeating lines written long before we learned to speak. That our future archaeologists might one day look for traces of us and find none. It makes you think differently about the ruins we study today, the temples, pyramids, and cities that still cling to the skin of the planet. They seem ancient to us, but they are infants compared to the Earth. If they can vanish in a blink of deep time, what hope does our digital world have? The cloud will dissipate. The servers will corrode. The data, billions of years of human expression, will vanish into the wind. Perhaps the true purpose of civilization is not to last forever, but to be rediscovered. To rise, fall, and rise again, each time remembering a little more. When I walk through the ruins of ancient places, the worn steps of Machu Picchu, the shattered walls of Angkor, the buried corridors of Mohenjo-Daro, I am struck by how easily nature reclaims what we call progress. Vines grow through stone, roots crack marble. Birdsong replaces human voices. Time does not destroy, it rebalances. And I wonder, what will future archaeologists make of us? If some distant intelligence, millions of years hence, digs into the layers of Earth and finds a faint global trace of plastic, a spike in CO2, a thin radioactive line, will they recognize us? Will they call it the Anthropocene layer? Or will they call it simply what we are? A brief experiment in awareness. They are warnings. Perhaps this is the real lesson buried in our myths. The floods, the falls, the golden ages turned to dust. They are not just stories of loss, they are warnings. Reminders that progress, unchecked by humility, always collapses under its own weight. The higher we climb, the further we have to fall. And every time we rebuild, convinced this time will be different. But progress, like the tide, is cyclical. It carries us forward, then draws us back, washing away arrogance, leaving behind wisdom in the sand. And though each civilization imagines itself eternal, the Earth remains the same, patient, observing, unmoved. We like to think of ourselves as modern, as the pinnacle of human evolution. Yet when you stand before the stones of Göbekli Tepe, or the submerged terraces of Yonaguni, you feel the weight of an older intelligence. Perhaps progress is not accumulation, but remembrance. a process of relearning what was once known and lost. Each rediscovery, each invention, each spark of insight, maybe it's not new at all, maybe it's ancestral, a forgotten melody being played once more by a different hand. The fragility of progress does not diminish our greatness, it defines it. We are transient, yes, but in our brief existence, we have learned to wonder, to look backward as much as forward, to seek meaning in impermanence. And so, the idea of the Silurian hypothesis isn't just scientific speculation. It's a mirror. It forces us to see our civilization in the proper scale of time. Not as a monument, but as a moment. A fleeting experiment in consciousness, bright, fragile, and finite. If there were civilizations before us, they too may have thought themselves invincible. If others come after us, they may think the same. And between each age, the earth will pause, breathe, and begin again. So as we close this chapter, imagine standing at the edge of a vast ocean of time. Behind you lie the myths of the flood, the memory of a world washed away. Before you lies the question of endurance, of what truly lasts. The water laps at your feet, patient and eternal. You realize that civilization, for all its brilliance, is but a ripple upon that sea. And when the tide recedes, as it always does, what remains is not our buildings, our empires, or our machines, but the faint, unbroken rhythm of the earth itself. A rhythm that says, I remember, I renew, I begin again. Part 5. The Flood Memory. The tide of civilization rises and falls, and when it falls too far, it leaves behind more than ruins, it leaves silence. Yet through that silence, one memory refuses to die. A single story told in 1,000 tongues, a story of water. Every culture remembers a flood, not a local storm, not a season of rain, but a deluge so vast it seemed to wash away the world itself. From Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to Noah in the Near East, from Manu in India to Deucalion in Greece, from the Maya and the Hopi in the Americas to the tales of the Aboriginal Australians, the same pattern returns. A world of hubris, a warning ignored, the waters rising, the few who survive, and the beginning again. To the modern mind, these are myths, moral lessons shaped by imagination. But to a historian who has spent a lifetime studying both the earth and its stories, the repetition feels too precise, too universal to dismiss. Perhaps these aren't fantasies at all, but memories, fossilized in language instead of stone. At the end of the last ice age, around 12,800 years ago, the planet convulsed. Temperatures rose abruptly. Glaciers that had held the continents in frozen stillness began to melt. Rivers swelled into torrents. Seas rose, not by inches but by hundreds of feet, drowning valleys and coastlines that had nurtured humanity's first experiments with settlement. Geologists call this period the Younger Dryas, a time of chaos when meltwater from collapsing ice sheets poured into the oceans, altering currents, climates, and coastlines. Within a few generations, the face of the earth changed forever. If entire cultures had thrived along those lost shores, their cities now lie buried beneath hundreds of meters of water, entombed in darkness. To the survivors, it must have felt like divine punishment. The sky itself falling, the horizon dissolving, the end of everything. Their descendants, unable to forget, turned trauma into myth. The myth, in turn, became the planet's memory. And here lies a beautiful paradox. Science and myth, often seen as adversaries, may simply be two dialects of the same story. Geology describes the physical event, the sudden warming, the meltwater pulses, the drowning of lands. Myth describes the emotional truth, terror, loss, renewal. Together they form the full memory of the earth. Consider the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest recorded story. In it, the gods, angered by human arrogance, send a flood to cleanse the world. One man, Utnapishtim, is warned, builds a great vessel, and survives to begin anew. It's an echo nearly identical of Noah of Manu of Deucalion. But beneath the divine language lies a geological heartbeat, the recollection of a time when the world truly drowned. In caves and on temple walls, the imagery persists. Waves swallowing mountains, ships carried above the clouds, suns rising over new worlds. These are not inventions of poets. They are ancestral diaries. The language of myth is metaphor, yes, but metaphor born from something real. Archaeologists have found signs of sudden destruction at the edges of ancient settlements, layers of silt and sand deposited by catastrophic floods. In North America, scientists have traced the paths of meltwater from glacial lakes that burst their icy dams, releasing energy equal to thousands of nuclear bombs. In the Black Sea region, marine geologists have found evidence that a massive influx of seawater once transformed a freshwater lake into the sea we know today, perhaps the origin of the biblical flood. Everywhere we dig, the ground seems to confirm what the stories have been saying for millennia. Once, the waters came. And when the waters receded, humanity began again. But something changed. The survivors carried more than tools and seeds. They carried memory. They told stories to their children about a world that had been swept away, about the dangers of pride and forgetfulness. Those stories spread, adapted, evolved. They became sacred texts, rituals, songs, warnings. The flood was not just destruction, it was instruction. Perhaps that is why the motif endures, because it speaks to a deeper cycle, one that transcends geology. Floods cleanse not only the earth, but the mind. They wash away the arrogance of permanence. They remind us that survival depends not on conquest, but on remembrance. When you read these myths side by side, you begin to feel their rhythm, a kind of global heartbeat. It pulses beneath the Maya Popol Vuh, in which the gods flood the world to erase flawed creations. Beneath the Hopi Sipapu, where humans flee underground to escape the rising sea. Beneath the Polynesian chants that speak of islands swallowed by waves and reborn as reefs. It is as if humanity itself is singing one song in many voices, a requiem for the world that was, and perhaps in some strange way the earth sings back. The roar of the ocean, the crash of waves, the endless ebb and flow of tides, all echoes of that ancient event. When we stand on a shore and listen to the surf, we are hearing the planet remembering. Modern science, in its precision, gives us numbers. Sea levels rose by 120 meters. The meltwater pulse lasted centuries. The temperature increase averaged 5 degrees. But myth gives us meaning. We were warned. We lost. We learned. One describes the mechanics of catastrophe. The other preserves its soul. Neither is complete without the other. And if we look deeper, another layer of symbolism emerges. The flood is not only the memory of water, it is the metaphor of forgetting. When the deluge came, it erased not just cities but knowledge. Languages vanished. Histories dissolved. What survived had to be rebuilt from fragments, oral traditions, fragments of geometry, whispers of astronomy. In that sense, the flood was not merely the drowning of land, but the drowning of memory itself. The earth forgot, and humanity began the long climb of remembering. Each new civilization, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Olmec, carried echoes of that lost inheritance. Their myths spoke of a time before the waters, when gods walked among men, when wisdom was whole. Maybe those gods were just ancestors, survivors of the age that ended, keepers of knowledge rescued from the flood. Today, scientists studying the sediment cores from the North Atlantic find thin, dark layers marking abrupt climate shifts and massive floods. To them, it is data. To me, it feels like handwriting, the Earth's own script, written in mud and memory. When we decode it, we aren't just reading the planet's past, we're rediscovering our own. For if myth and science are two halves of the same truth, then perhaps the flood is not over. Perhaps it is ongoing, not of water this time, but of information. A deluge of data washing over us faster than we can remember it. And like those ancient peoples, we risk losing the very thing that makes us human: the story. Standing on a cliff overlooking the sea, I sometimes imagine what it must have felt like. That first morning after the deluge, the sky washed clean, the air heavy with salt and silence. The survivors emerging from caves or mountain shelters, looking upon a world both familiar and strange. Every landmark gone, every boundary erased. In that moment, the planet was reborn, and so were we. They must have understood something we've forgotten: that life continues only by letting go of what has drowned. The flood was not the end of humanity. It was its baptism. So the myth endures, not because it explains the past, but because it warns the future. Every age faces its own rising waters, physical, moral, or spiritual, and each must decide what to carry through, what knowledge to preserve before the tide returns. If the ancients could speak to us now, they might not warn of wrathful gods, but of our own blindness. They might say, "Remember the waters. Remember what they took and what they gave back." Because every flood cleansed the world, but it also cleans the mind. It forces us to begin again, humbler, wiser, and infinitely more fragile. In the end, the flood is both history and prophecy. It is the planet's way of resetting the clock, of reminding life that nothing is permanent. Not cities, not empires, not even continents. Only memory endures, and memory, like the tide, always returns. So as the story of the deluge ripples through time, from clay tablets to scripture, from myth to geology, we find ourselves listening not to superstition, but to survival. The waters came, they will come again, and each time humanity will remember, just long enough to forget. Part 6: The Lost Continents. The waters rose, and the world was remade. When the glaciers melted at the end of the last ice age, they didn't just drown valleys or swallow coasts. They redrew the face of the earth itself. The map we know today is only the latest draft in an endless cycle of change, a sketch on shifting parchment. In that ancient time of upheaval, entire regions, vast thriving landscapes, vanished beneath the waves. Once, Britain was not an island, Indonesia was not an archipelago, and Alaska was not a lonely frontier of ice. The continents were connected by bridges of land woven together by plains, rivers, and forests that no longer exist. Those vanished realms, Doggerland, Sunda, and Beringia, were the crossroads of the ancient world, the highways of prehistory. And though they lie silent now beneath the sea, the echoes of footsteps still seem to move across their drowned horizons. Doggerland once stretched from the British Isles to mainland Europe, a vast, fertile plain of rivers and lakes. It was a land of deer and mammoth, of hunters who followed herds across open meadows that are now the floor of the North Sea. To those people, the end must have come slowly, like a dream dissolving, the ground growing wetter each year, the horizon creeping inward, until finally the sea claimed it all. Today, fishermen sometimes pull up bones and tools from the depths, the last whispers of that forgotten landscape. Thousands of miles to the east, Sunda connected what we now call Indonesia with mainland Southeast Asia and Australia. It was once a vast tropical world. Forests stretching from Borneo to Java, great rivers winding through fertile deltas, and perhaps, on those shores, the earliest human settlements we have never found. Then the sea rose, 1 meter, 2, 10, 100, and the lowlands became islands. Indonesia as we know it was born not from creation but from loss, and to the north another bridge, Beringia, once joined Siberia to Alaska. Across its frozen plains walked mammoths, bison, and the first humans to reach the Americas. They crossed not by boats but on foot, following game and season, unaware they were stepping into history. When the waters rose, Beringia disappeared beneath the Arctic Ocean, severing the continents and sealing that chapter of migration forever. Each of these lands was once home, perhaps to tens of thousands of people, perhaps to entire cultures now erased. They are not legends, not guesses. They are geological fact. And yet, like Atlantis, they haunt us, because we cannot help but wonder what vanished with them. Did those plains echo with language, music, art? Did they build, worship, love, and bury their dead beneath skies now drowned? If they did, then their ruins, their tools, their very stories lie buried beneath silt and coral. Beyond the reach of sunlight, beyond memory. The flood did not only erase land, it erased context. We see fragments on the surviving shores, a shard of pottery here, a pattern of migration there, but the whole tapestry is gone. To understand the true origin of civilization, we would have to drain the seas. Modern technology allows us a glimpse. Faint, imperfect, but thrilling. Sonar scans reveal ghostly riverbeds winding across the seafloor where no river now flows. Sediment layers show the outlines of valleys, deltas, and even structures that seem too symmetrical, too deliberate to be accidents of geology. Off the coast of India, in the Gulf of Combat, sonar has mapped what appears to be the grid of a city. Streets, foundations, perhaps even walls, buried under 7 stories of silt. Off Malta, divers have found temples beneath the waves, carved with the same spiral motifs seen on land. And near Yonaguni, Japan, we find terraces and staircases descending into the blue, their sharp angles softened by time, their origins still fiercely debated. Each discovery adds another line to a poem the Earth has been writing since the Ice Age. A poem of loss, persistence, and return. Science tells us that 20 million square kilometers of land vanished beneath rising seas between 20,000 and 8,000 BCE, an area larger than modern Europe and South America combined. That is not a myth, that is geology. And yet, our ancestors remembered it as a story of gods and floods. They turned the trauma of landscape into legend. Because how else can a species process such devastation? Imagine your world shrinking every year. Familiar paths disappearing, mountains becoming islands, the sea swallowing villages where your grandparents were born. Generation after generation watching the horizon draw nearer, until the ocean itself became the boundary of memory. That was not just environmental change, that was existential collapse. When I look at a modern map, I see not stability but absence. Each coastline is a wound, each island a remnant. The earth is full of ghosts and they lie beneath the water. Archaeologists call the submerged world the Blue Continent, a realm of lost history. It's where the answers may sleep to questions we haven't yet learned to ask. Because if civilization did not begin in the dry river valleys of Mesopotamia or Egypt, but along those drowned continental shelves, then much of our story is missing. We are studying only the ruins that escaped the flood. What we call the beginning of civilization may simply be the aftermath, of a much older world. This thought is both thrilling and humbling. Thrilling because it means there is more to discover than we dared hope. Humbling because it reminds us that we, too, live in a moment between tides. The ice melts again, the seas rise again, and perhaps 10,000 years from now, someone will sail above the drowned ruins of our cities and wonder who we were. The ocean, we once thought, was a place of oblivion, a graveyard of lost things. But perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps it is not a tomb, but an archive, a vast, unlit library where the planet stores its forgotten chapters. Every coral reef that grows atop a sunken mountain, every current that drifts over an ancient plain, is preserving evidence of worlds we no longer remember. The sea does not destroy, it conceals. It holds its breath, waiting for us to listen. And when we dive into its depths, when we send down our machines and lights into that endless dark, what we are really doing is looking into time itself. Every echo of sonar, every grain of silt disturbed, every submerged valley rediscovered, is a step closer to reuniting with our own lost story. Perhaps that's why these explorations move us so deeply. They are acts of remembrance. We are not searching for treasure. We are searching for ourselves. If we are willing to listen, the drowned lands still speak. The rivers of Doggerland flow again through sonar images. The forests of Sunda rustle faintly in the shifting currents. The frozen tundra of Beringia whispers beneath Arctic ice. And in those whispers a truth emerges, that humanity's home was never fixed. We have always been wanderers, children of a planet in motion. The continents rise and fall, the sea advances and retreats, but something within us remains, the will to adapt, to rebuild, to remember. The ancient flood myths, the geological record, and these submerged continents are not separate stories. They are different verses of the same song. Together, they reveal a pattern, a heartbeat, that has pulsed through every age of the earth: creation, destruction, renewal. We lose the land and with it part of ourselves. But in losing, we learn. We remember what truly matters. Not permanence, but connection. So as the camera drifts over the silent plains of the seafloor, where rivers once flowed and fires once burned, it's hard not to feel awe. Somewhere down there may rest the first stories, the first songs, the first traces of the human dream. Not vanished, but waiting. Because the ocean is not where memory dies. It is where memory sleeps. And as the light fades into blue and the horizon dissolves, we return to the surface with a final reflection. A thought that binds myth, geology, and destiny together. The sea does not bury the past. It keeps it, patiently, quietly, until we are ready to remember again. Part 7. Patterns in Stone and Sky. The ocean keeps its memories hidden beneath the waves. But when we step back onto land, another kind of memory awaits. One not buried in water or time, but written boldly into the face of the earth itself. For as soon as humanity could lift its eyes from the flood, it began to build. And what we built, from the Andes to the Nile, from the jungles of Cambodia to the plains of England, all pointed upward, to the sky, to the stars, to something greater. Across every continent, the ancient world seems to have been engaged in a single conversation, a dialogue between stone and heaven. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the megaliths of Stonehenge, the citadel of Machu Picchu, each aligned with celestial precision so exact that even our modern instruments can only marvel. They mark solstices and equinoxes, lunar cycles and stellar risings. They are calendars, temples, observatories, and perhaps something more. monuments to memory itself. It begins, as so many mysteries do, with a pattern. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid faces true north, not roughly, not approximately, but with an accuracy of mere arc minutes. In England, the stones of Stonehenge form an open gate that captures the first light of midsummer dawn and the last glow of midwinter dusk. High in the Andes, the terraces of Machu Picchu align with the rising sun of the equinox, when day and night stand in perfect balance. In Mexico, the temple of Kukulcán at Chichen Itza casts a shadow that slithers like a serpent of light down its staircase twice a year, on the solstice and the equinox, a spectacle so precise it feels intentional, theatrical, divine. From continent to continent, the story repeats. Civilizations separated by oceans and millennia, all building with the same purpose, to mirror the sky upon the earth. Coincidence or connection? If it were only one or two examples, we could dismiss it, but it is everywhere. From the deserts of Egypt to the jungles of Cambodia, the mountains of Peru, the plains of China, the same sacred geometry, the same numbers, the same celestial harmony. Angles, ratios, and alignments reappear with uncanny consistency. 72, 108, 432. Numbers that recur not only in architecture but in myth, music, and cosmology. In ancient India, 108 was the number of beads on a mala, the steps to spiritual completion. In Mesopotamia, 432,000 was the number of years the gods reigned before the flood. In Norse myth, Valhalla had 540 doors, each admitting 800 warriors, again, 432,000 in total. Even the earth itself turns with this rhythm. The precession of the equinoxes moves 1 degree every 72 years. The same number encoded in the temples of Egypt and the pyramids of Central America. What could account for such mathematical unity across so many cultures that never met? Is it coincidence or the fingerprint of a shared inheritance? Perhaps these were not merely structures, but instruments built to measure time, to harmonize with the heavens, to remind humanity of its place in a cosmic order. The ancients did not see the sky as empty. To them, it was alive, a realm of gods, ancestors, and eternal cycles. The stars were not decorations, they were coordinates of meaning. By aligning stone to star, they aligned the mortal world to the divine. And yet, beneath this reverence lies something strikingly scientific. The builders of Giza understood astronomy and geometry at a level that defies our assumptions about primitive minds. The layout of the 3 pyramids mirrors the 3 stars of Orion's belt with uncanny precision, not just in pattern, but in proportional distance. At Angkor Wat, the towers and causeways encode the length of the solar year, the lunar cycle, and even the precessional shift of the equinoxes. A cycle spanning 26,000 years. In the Americas, the Mayan calendar system recorded cosmic periods of astonishing accuracy, more exact in some cases than those used in Europe until the Renaissance. If all of this is chance, it is a remarkably intelligent kind of chance. As a historian, I have spent decades walking among these stones, tracing their alignments at dawn and dusk, feeling the geometry not just with instruments, but with the body. At sunrise, when light pierces the axis of a temple exactly as it did thousands of years ago, something ancient stirs, a sense that time itself is circular, that knowledge is not accumulated but remembered. Because that is what these monuments truly are. Mnemonic devices on a planetary scale. They are the Earth's memory written in architecture, reminders for future ages that once humanity knew how to listen to the cosmos. When floods erase the land, when civilizations vanish, these stones remain, silent, teachers waiting for us to look up again. The deeper one studies them, the more they reveal a common language. It is a language of geometry and light, of circles, triangles, golden ratios, and sacred alignments. The ancients built in proportions that mirrored the human body, the curve of a shell, the spiral of galaxies. To them, beauty and truth were not separate. The architecture of the temple was the architecture of the universe. Modern science has begun to confirm what ancient intuition already knew, that nature itself is mathematical, that symmetry is the grammar of creation. From the orbit of planets to the unfolding of flowers, from the vibration of strings to the spiral of DNA, the same patterns repeat. What the ancients called sacred geometry, we now call physics. Two languages, one reality. Could it be, then, that these ancient builders were not guessing at the cosmos but remembering it? That what we see as superstition was, in truth, a legacy? Fragments of knowledge passed down from a forgotten age, perhaps even one lost to the floods we have just spoken of? If so, then these alignments are not coincidences. They are fingerprints of continuity, evidence that the human quest to understand the heavens long predates the civilizations we credit as first. It is tempting to think of progress as linear, from darkness to light, from ignorance to science. But what if it is cyclical, like the very stars we study? What if each era is a rediscovery of truths once known and then forgotten? Look again at the pyramids, the megaliths, the observatories of stone. They are not isolated achievements. They are memory nodes in a planetary network, expressions of the same cosmic curiosity. The ancients did not compete with nature. They cooperated with it. Their temples were not impositions on the landscape, but extensions of it. Built along magnetic lines, anchored to celestial axes, they turned the world itself into an instrument of harmony. And that may be the greatest difference between them and us. We build to dominate. They built to belong. Sometimes, standing among these ruins at twilight, I imagine the moment of their creation, the architects lifting their eyes to the same stars we see tonight, whispering calculations, aligning shadows, waiting for the sun to fall at just the right angle. They were scientists, artists, philosophers, all at once. And when their work was done, they left behind something far more enduring than themselves. Stone that remembers the sky. It is said that when you align yourself to the cosmos, you no longer feel alone. Perhaps that is why they built, to stay connected, to keep the heavens close even when the earth trembled. Each monument was both question and answer, a bridge between matter and mystery. And so the pattern emerges, not merely in stone but in intention. Across millennia, humanity has carved the same message into the earth. We were here. We looked up. We saw the same stars you see now. And we understood, if only for a moment, that we were part of something infinite. That realization unites every age, every continent, every soul who ever wondered what lies beyond. It is the same wonder that built the pyramids, and the same wonder that guides the astronomers of today. Because whether we use stone or steel, compass or telescope, we are driven by the same yearning, to make sense of the sky, and through it, of ourselves. The patterns carved in rock and reflected in the heavens are not remnants of superstition. They are humanity's oldest science, its first art, its most enduring prayer. They remind us that our story is written not only in books, but in landscapes, that to read history properly, we must look both downward and upward, into the ground and into the stars. Perhaps that is the true purpose of these monuments. not to prove how much we knew, but to remind us how much we have forgotten. And as the camera pulls back from the desert of Egypt, from the green hills of England, from the misted peaks of the Andes, the shapes begin to connect. Lines of geometry stretch across the globe, linking temples and tombs into a single pattern, like constellations on the surface of the earth. The planet itself becomes a map of memory, a mirror of the heavens. In the next chapter of this story, we will follow those lines further, into the hearts of the builders, into the mathematics that unites myth and matter, into the universal blueprint that binds the human spirit to the cosmos. Because once you see the pattern, you can never unsee it. Part 8. The Forgotten Engineers. When we left the temples aligned to the stars, our eyes were fixed upon the heavens. Now it's time to look down, to the stones themselves. Because for all the wonder of their celestial precision, there lies another question even more bewildering. Carved not in the sky, but in the rock. How did they do it? How did the ancients, people we call primitive, move stones heavier than a modern locomotive? How did they cut granite, basalt, and andesite with a smoothness that even diamond tools struggle to replicate? How did they fit blocks so perfectly that after thousands of years, you still cannot slip a razor blade between them? It is in these silent stones that the line between myth and engineering begins to blur. At first glance, the question seems simple. Surely they had ropes, levers, manpower, a primitive but effective combination. But the deeper we look, the less satisfying that answer becomes. Because the feats of ancient engineering aren't just difficult. They are, in some cases, beyond replication with the technology we possess today. Take Baalbek in modern-day Lebanon, home to the Roman Temple of Jupiter. Beneath its grand columns lies an older foundation, far older than Rome itself. There, 3 colossal stones known as the Trilithon form a single wall. Each weighs approximately 800 tons, and one nearby, never moved from its quarry, is estimated at over 1,200 tons. To put that in perspective, that's the weight of a fully loaded Boeing 747. And yet these blocks are set so precisely that they remain perfectly level after thousands of years of earthquakes and erosion. How could such a thing be done? Without cranes, without steel, without even the wheel as we know it? No ancient text explains it. No archaeological reconstruction has ever demonstrated it. The stones simply exist, silent, immovable, defying time and explanation. Across the world, the same enigma reappears. In Peru, high in the Andes, lies Pumapunku, part of the Tiwanaku complex, a place so strange that even seasoned archaeologists admit it feels out of place in its own time. Here, massive blocks of andesite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, have been cut, shaped, and joined with geometric perfection. They are interlocking like Lego pieces, with angles so sharp and smooth that modern masons struggle to explain them. The precision of the cuts, parallel grooves, right angles, boreholes, gives the uncanny impression of machining, as though the builders had access to tools far beyond the Bronze Age. The most striking thing about Pumapunku is not its scale, it's its intelligence. Every piece fits into another with mechanical elegance, as if part of a vast disassembled engine. To stand among those stones is to feel the echo of a lost instruction manual. And then, of course, there are the Egyptian pyramids. Timeless, omnipresent, endlessly debated. For centuries we've been told they were built by sheer human will. Slaves, ropes, ramps, and years of toil. But the numbers don't add up. If 2.3 million limestone blocks were laid over 20 years, that means one block every 2.5 minutes, each weighing several tons, hoisted with perfect alignment up a rising slope hundreds of feet high. Even today, with cranes and lasers, reproducing that scale and precision would be monumental. And yet, 4,500 years ago, it was done flawlessly. The base of the Great Pyramid is level within less than an inch. Its four sides align almost perfectly to true north. Its dimensions encode mathematical constants like pi and 5, the golden ratio. Coincidence or comprehension? In Cusco, Ollantaytambo, and Sacsayhuaman, the walls are built from stones that seem to have been melted into place. Irregular, multi-angled blocks, each different in shape, yet joined so seamlessly that they've withstood earthquakes for centuries without mortar. The stones curve around each other as if soft when placed, as if molded like clay. Was this mere craftsmanship, or did the builders understand something about matter, vibration, or resonance that we've forgotten? Modern stonemasons often shake their heads when visiting these sites. They can explain the result, but not the method. Even with diamond saws and laser levels, duplicating such joints in hard stone would be painfully slow, prohibitively expensive, and almost impossible on that scale. So, who were these engineers, and what did they know? Perhaps it's not the tools that matter, but the understanding. Maybe the ancients saw matter differently, not as solid and inert, but as alive, responsive, resonant. In almost every ancient culture, there are whispers of a forgotten science of sound and vibration, the use of acoustic resonance to move, shape, or even levitate stone. In Egypt, legends speak of priests who sang the blocks into place. In Tibet, travelers once wrote of monks who used trumpets and drums to raise boulders up cliffs. In South America, oral traditions tell of the stones that sang when touched by certain instruments. We call these myths, but what if they are metaphors for a principle we no longer grasp? The manipulation of frequency and matter at a level that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. Today, physicists speak of the world as vibration. Every atom is a note in the symphony of existence, its structure defined not by solidity but by frequency. Matter is energy slowed down, sound given form. If that is true, then perhaps the ancient engineers, through intuition, observation, or inherited wisdom, understood this truth long before we gave it mathematical language. They may not have had electricity or engines, but they understood resonance, the way vibration can alter the state of matter. They built temples and chambers whose acoustics amplify specific frequencies. At places like the Hypogeum of Malta, or the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, sound behaves strangely. Voices echo with unnatural depth. Certain tones seem to vibrate through the bones rather than the air. These were not accidents of architecture. They were designs of experience. There's another layer too, one that bridges the physical and the metaphysical. Perhaps the act of building was itself a ritual of remembrance, a way of preserving lost knowledge in the only medium eternal enough to survive time, stone. Each temple, each megalith, was both a structure and a symbol, a coded transmission from one cycle of humanity to the next. They were saying, without words, we knew, we understood, remember us. The irony, of course, is that their message survived, but the method did not. The stones remain, the science is gone. When we call them primitive, we reveal more about ourselves than about them. We mistake humility for ignorance, patience for weakness. But perhaps what we call progress, the speed, the noise, the endless hunger for more, is merely a symptom of forgetting. The ancients built slowly, deliberately, aligned with the cosmos, attuned to the Earth's resonance. We build quickly, efficiently, disconnected from rhythm and meaning. Maybe they were not behind us. Maybe they were simply walking a different path. To walk among the ruins of Baalbek, or to touch the stones of Pumapunku, is to feel a strange vertigo. The sensation that history is upside down, that the deeper we dig, the more sophisticated the builders become. That perhaps civilization is not a straight ascent, but a series of awakenings, each rising from the rubble of the last, each rediscovering a fraction of what was lost. When you look closely enough, the world's megalithic sites begin to form a pattern. The same geometry, the same precision, the same silent testimony. It is as though one global hand once guided them, one ancient memory whispering across time. Build this way. Align with the stars. Remember the harmony of the world. We may never know exactly how they moved the stones or what tools they used. But maybe that's not the point. The mystery endures because it asks something of us. To look deeper, to question more, to see the past not as a line, but as a mirror. The forgotten engineers are not gone. They live on in every perfect joint, every measured angle, every monument that still stands against the storms of time. They remind us that knowledge like stone can sleep, but it never truly dies. So as the sun sets over Baalbek, casting long shadows across the cyclopean blocks, one can almost hear it, the low hum of the earth itself, vibrating through the ages, a resonance of memory, calling to us through silence. We built not just with our hands, but with our understanding of the universe. When you are ready to remember, the stones will still be here. Part 9. The Global Blueprint. When we left the colossal stones of Baalbek and Pumapunku, the question still hung in the air like an echo. How did they build such wonders, and why? Perhaps the answer lies not only in the stone, but in the pattern. A pattern that stretches far beyond any single site, beyond any single civilization. Because the deeper we look, the more it seems that ancient builders were not working in isolation. Across oceans and millennia, they followed the same principles, the same proportions, the same celestial alignments. It is as if the earth itself were their canvas and the sky their guide, and the message they carved into stone, whether in the deserts of Egypt or the jungles of Cambodia, was one and the same: harmony. Every sacred monument on earth, from the pyramids of Giza to the temples of Angkor, speaks a single architectural language, the geometry of balance between heaven and earth. It's as though the ancients saw creation itself as a conversation between the two. The world below mirroring the world above. In Egypt, the three great pyramids of Giza stand not merely as tombs, but as mirrors of the stars of Orion's belt, aligned with such precision that their pattern matches the heavens circa 10,500 BCE. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat, a masterpiece of stone and symmetry, reflects the constellation Draco, the celestial serpent that winds around the northern sky. In Mexico, the temple of Kukulcán at Chichen Itza becomes a living calendar, projecting the illusion of a serpent of light along its staircase during the equinox, when shadow and sun perform a cosmic dance known to priests long dead. And these are not isolated coincidences. They are part of a global tapestry, threads of geometry and light woven across continents, each pointing not inward, but upward. The more we map these monuments, the more astonishing the picture becomes. Their positions on the earth often correspond to geometric relationships, triangles, meridians, and golden proportions, as if designed upon a single invisible grid. Some researchers have noted that the Great Pyramid sits near the very center of the planet's landmass. Others observe alignments that connect Giza, Easter Island, Machu Picchu, and Angkor along great circle paths. It's as though the ancients possessed a knowledge of the planet's curvature, a geodetic awareness we only regained with satellites. Was this intentional? Or are we simply rediscovering the mathematics of nature, the same patterns that every civilization, in its own way, tried to echo? What fascinates me is that this blueprint, this silent architecture of alignment, seems to emerge wherever humanity seeks to touch the sacred. The same numbers repeat like a refrain in an ancient psalm, 72, 108 to 16, 432. The same shapes reappear, the circle, the triangle, the spiral, each symbolizing unity, balance, creation. The same golden ratio, phi, the proportion of beauty itself, found in the pyramids, in the Parthenon, in the temples of Angkor, and even in the structure of the human body. It is as though, in different tongues and under different skies, the builders were all remembering the same truth, that the laws of the universe are not ours. They belong to the earth. We often imagine the ancients as fragmented peoples, Egyptians over here, Maya over there, Khmer in the east, Inca in the west. But perhaps that separation is an illusion of time. Perhaps, in the distant dawn of human history, there was a shared system of thought, a universal grammar of geometry and light, a language without words, but written in ratio and resonance. If so, then these monuments are not just temples, they are letters, inscribed upon the planet, addressed to whoever would one day look closely enough to read them. And what do they say? That the cosmos is not chaotic, that Earth is not accidental, that humanity, when it builds in harmony with nature, becomes part of the divine architecture. There is something deeply moving about this idea, because it suggests that the ancients were not trying to dominate the earth. They were trying to tune to it. Their temples were instruments. Their monuments were melodies. Each alignment, each ratio, was a note in a planetary symphony, a reminder that knowledge and beauty are one and the same. We've long believed that progress means breaking away from myth and superstition, replacing intuition with science. But perhaps the ancients never saw a division between the two. For them, geometry was theology, astronomy was philosophy, and the act of building was both art and prayer. Their technology may have been different, but their goal was profoundly human, to belong to something eternal. If we view their creations through that lens, the so-called mysteries begin to make sense. The pyramid aligned to Orion is not merely a cosmic map. It is a reminder of humanity's place in the celestial order. Angkor Wat's reflection of Draco is not superstition. It is reverence for the cosmic serpent that circles the axis of the world. The serpent of light that slithers down the Maya pyramid is not a trick of architecture. It is a celebration of renewal, the eternal balance of dark and dawn. Everywhere the same message, as above, so below, as within, so without. This idea, that earth and sky mirror one another, appears in every spiritual tradition. In Egypt it was Ma'at, the principle of universal balance. In India, Ah, the cosmic order that sustains creation. In China, the harmony of heaven and earth, Tian and Di, joined by the human heart at the center. Even in Western alchemy, the phrase persists like a whisper from that ancient unity. As above, so below. It is the oldest truth humanity has ever known, and perhaps the one we most need to remember. As I travel between these sites from continent to continent, a strange sense of continuity takes hold. The air feels familiar, even halfway around the world. The stones seem to hum with the same frequency. The geometry changes, the art changes, the gods change, but the intention remains identical: to align human life with the pulse of the cosmos. It's as though these monuments are not isolated achievements, but chapters in a single global story. A story about how to live in rhythm with the universe. And maybe that story was never meant for the ancients alone. Maybe it was meant for us. We, who now build towers of steel that pierce the clouds, often forget the ground beneath us. We build higher, faster, louder, but rarely in harmony. The ancients, with their patient stones and timeless stars, remind us that technology without wisdom is noise, that progress without reverence is blindness. They built not to conquer the heavens, but to remember them. We build to escape the earth. They built to understand it. Perhaps that's why their monuments endure, because they are not merely constructions, but relationships. They belong to both the planet and the cosmos, and thus they belong to time itself. Some say the alignments are coincidence, that the patterns are illusions of meaning drawn by our longing for connection. And yet, the same could be said of constellations. The stars themselves are scattered randomly across space. The shapes we see are made by imagination. But in that act of connecting the dots, we discover something deeper. Not objective truth, but participation in the universe's design. Maybe the ancients understood that too, that meaning is not found, it is made, through harmony, through observation, through faith in the intelligence of creation. And so, standing once again at the foot of the Great Pyramid, or in the shadow of Angkor's towers, or beneath the equinox sun at Chichen Itza, the quiet understanding dawns. These were not just places of worship. They were mirrors, reflecting the world as it was, as it is, and as it could be. They are blueprints, not for buildings, but for balance. They remind us that to build something sacred is to build an awareness of the whole. What, then, is the message encoded in this global blueprint? It is simple and profound. Knowledge does not belong to any one civilization. It belongs to the earth, to the living system that sustains us all. The ancients knew that wisdom, like light, cannot be owned. It can only be passed on. Their temples and pyramids were not monuments to their power, but gifts sent forward in time, waiting for us to understand. Perhaps they were saying, remember that the world is alive. Remember that you are part of it. Remember that harmony is not found in dominance, but in alignment. So the stones still stand, in silence, in symmetry, in eternal conversation with the stars. Their message is not lost, it only waits for us to listen. And as the sun sets over Giza, its light gliding perfectly along the ancient axis, the earth and sky meet once more, not in myth, but in geometry, in truth, in the quiet promise that what was known can be known again. Part 10th, the memory of the earth. We have traced humanity's memory, in myth, in stone, in the stars. But there is another memory, older than language, older than any civilization, older even than life itself. It does not speak in words or symbols, it speaks in layers. The earth remembers, not through stories but through strata. Every grain of sand, every vein of rock, every frozen bubble of air is a page in the diary of a planet that has never stopped recording. While we forget, it remembers. While our monuments crumble, it continues to write, quietly, patiently, endlessly. And if we learn how to read that diary, we discover that the earth knows more about us than we know about ourselves. In Greenland and Antarctica, scientists drill deep into the ice. Cylinders of frozen time, drawn from depths that predate civilization. Each layer of ice is a year, sometimes a season, sometimes a moment, a snowfall that trapped the breath of the world as it was. Inside those layers are tiny bubbles of ancient air, sealed like fragile whispers from another age. They hold the composition of the atmosphere, the rhythm of climate, the scars of catastrophe. In them we find traces of volcanic ash, soot from forest fires, pollen from vanished forests, even cosmic dust from meteor impacts. The ice doesn't lie. It remembers every storm, every drought, every rise and fall of temperature. It remembers the tremors of extinction and the slow pulse of rebirth. And sometimes, just sometimes, it remembers something unnatural. In certain layers, scientists have found anomalies, abrupt spikes in carbon levels, strange deposits of heavy metals, isotopic signatures that don't fit the natural cycle. To modern eyes, these could be the fingerprints of industry, combustion, extraction, metallurgy. But these layers are ancient, far older than us. Millions of years older. Most dismiss them as natural, the residue of volcanism or cosmic events. And perhaps they are. But what if, hidden among the countless epochs of stone and ice, there lies evidence not of nature but of memory, not of accidents but of ancestors? It's a question that unsettles as much as it inspires. Could another civilization have lived, thrived, and vanished long before ours? And if so, would the Earth remember them? The Silurian Hypothesis. A scientific thought experiment dares to ask exactly that. If an industrial civilization had existed millions of years ago, would there be any trace of it left today? The answer, almost paradoxically, is no, because the Earth is not a museum. It is a recycling engine. Its surface is erased and rewritten by tectonics, erosion, ocean currents, and time. Given just a few million years, even the most enduring artifacts, steel, concrete, plastic, would vanish. All that might remain are chemical scars. Subtle changes in isotopes, shifts in carbon cycles, anomalous concentrations of elements that hint faintly at intelligence. The idea is not that there was such a civilization, only that, if there were, we would almost certainly never know. The evidence would be erased, digested, reincorporated into new stone, new soil, new life. The Earth keeps everything but in its own handwriting, and we are still learning to read it. Some are catastrophic. When you stand before an exposed cliff face, you are looking into a book that has been open for billions of years. Each layer is a chapter. Some are peaceful, some catastrophic. Thin lines of ash tell of eruptions that darken the skies for centuries. Shifts in color mark the advance and retreat of oceans. In some places, layers vanish entirely, compressed, folded, or melted by the planet's restlessness, as if pages have been torn from the text. And in those missing pages, what stories have been lost? How many worlds has this world already seen? Deep in the rock record, we find evidence of extinction so vast they make human history seem like a heartbeat. The Permian extinction, 252 million years ago, wiped out 90% of species, perhaps caused by volcanic eruptions that reshaped the atmosphere. The Cretaceous extinction ended the age of dinosaurs and began the rise of mammals, our distant inheritance. Each of these events is marked not by fossils, but by chemistry, a sudden spike in iridium, carbon, or sulfur, a signature of destruction preserved in the bones of the Earth. What if, somewhere among these chemical signatures, there are others, subtler, stranger, not born of volcanoes or meteors, but of civilization? A brief, fiery layer where the world itself overheated, not by chance, but by design. The planet would not judge, it would not protest, it would simply record, and then recover. That is the humbling truth of planetary memory. The Earth forgets nothing, but forgives everything. It has endured continents breaking, oceans boiling, skies turning to poison, and yet life always returns. Civilizations, species, even mountains come and go, but the memory remains. Not as a warning, but as a rhythm. The planet remembers through transformation. We, on the other hand, remember through fear. Of loss, of oblivion, of being forgotten. But to the Earth, forgetting and remembering are the same process. To erase is to renew. When scientists peer into the microscopic record, into pollen grains trapped in ancient mud, into mineral dust in Antarctic cores, they are not just studying the past. They are decoding a consciousness older than thought. The planet itself is aware, in its own slow language, of everything that has ever happened to it. It has no need for words. Its syntax is chemistry. Its grammar is time. Every shift in isotope, every pattern of sediment, every trapped bubble of gas is a sentence in that infinite book. And we, brief, noisy, luminous creatures, are merely the latest paragraph. It's strange to think that even now, our own age is being recorded in that same quiet way. Future beings, whether human or something else, may one day drill into the layers of our time and find traces of us. A sudden bloom of plastics, a spike in carbon, a faint dusting of radioactive isotopes. That will be our fossilized signature, our entry in the planetary archive. A thin, dark band marking the moment when one species briefly reshaped the biosphere. We call it the Anthropocene. To the Earth, it is just another line in its diary. And so, perhaps, this is the truest perspective. We are not the authors of Earth's story, we are its temporary witnesses. We are reading a few lines from a book whose first page began 4.5 billion years ago, and whose last page will still be written long after we are gone. To the planet, a civilization is not a monument. It is a weather pattern, a brief phase in the endless cycle of creation and decay. And yet, somehow, that realization does not diminish us. It ennobles us. Because even if our trace is small, it is part of something vast, a continuum of memory that stretches from molten rock to human thought. There's a quiet poetry in knowing that the same atoms that once burned in ancient suns now form our bones, that the same carbon that once fed prehistoric forests now fuels our breath. The Earth's memory is not distant from us. We are made of it. Each of us carries within our bodies the dust of extinct mountains, the salts of vanished seas, the minerals of forgotten worlds. We are the living continuation of that geological story. And maybe that's what the ancients intuited. When they built their temples to align with the stars, when they carved their gods into stone, they were trying to become part of the Earth's memory. To leave behind something that would outlast flesh, something that the planet itself would remember. If another civilization once walked this planet millions of years ago, if others built, dreamed, and perished before us, then the Earth has already absorbed their story. We will never find their cities, but perhaps, somewhere deep beneath our feet, their last breath lingers in a molecule of trapped air, in a whisper of altered carbon, in a subtle shimmer of metal in the stone. Their monuments may have vanished, but their chemistry endures. And that is what makes the Earth not just a planet, but a memory. As the camera pans over glaciers and mountains, deserts and oceans, the world seems to breathe. Slow, immense, eternal. It has seen civilizations rise like waves and fall like foam. It has recorded every triumph, every extinction, every silence. It does not forget because it is memory. And if we listen, truly listen, we might hear it speak, not in words, but in the steady heartbeat of time itself. I remember everything. I am not your past. I am your witness. Part Viven. The planet as witness. The Earth forgets, and yet it does not. Its crust melts, reforms, erases, and rewrites itself again and again. Continents drift, mountains rise, oceans swallow and retreat. To the casual eye, it seems as though the planet renews itself by forgetting. But deep within those layers of rock and mineral lies a different truth. The Earth never truly forgets. It only remembers in a language too vast, too patient for us to read. Every epoch, every extinction, every flicker of life is recorded, not as stories but as chemistry. Volcanic ash becomes punctuation. Fossils become syllables. Carbon isotopes become the rhythm of breath itself. The planet's surface is not just terrain, it is text, inscribed by time and rewritten by fire. We, the latest readers of this endless script, have only begun to decipher a few of its lines. The geological record is a slow memoir. Each layer of stone is a page written in elements: iron, sulfur, carbon, silicon, a mineral syntax through which the Earth testifies to its own transformations. Mass extinctions, climate shifts, cosmic impacts, all leave traces so subtle and yet so persistent that millions of years later they still speak. A sudden spike in iridium tells of an asteroid's kiss. A band of dark shale murmurs of oceans without oxygen. A thin smear of soot marks a time when the world itself caught fire. It is easy to forget that our history, our wars, our empires, our architecture will one day become another thin layer of such residue. One more paragraph in the autobiography of the planet. And what if, buried in those older pages, there are other paragraphs we have yet to notice? Not written in fossils or ruins, but in chemistry. Tiny imbalances, impossible isotopes, faint scars of an intelligence that lived, burned, and vanished before us. If another civilization once rose and fell upon this planet, what would remain of them now? Not their monuments. The crust would have devoured them. Not their machines. Metal corrodes, silicon dissolves. But their signature might persist, a molecular afterimage, a whisper in the balance of elements, a layer where carbon surged too sharply, or metals appeared that nature never creates alone. Perhaps those traces are already in our rocks and cores, unnoticed or misunderstood, the faint echoes of minds that once dreamed beneath these same stars. The physicist and the poet share the same awe when faced with deep time. For what is the Earth, if not a patient witness to everything? It has seen continents bloom and die. It has endured impacts from worlds that no longer exist. It has recorded 5 mass extinctions, each wiping the slate clean, each followed by new life, as though the planet itself exhaled, paused, and began again. To the Earth, intelligence may not be a novelty. It may be a recurring event, an experiment conducted again and again, each time leaving a faint chemical chord, a dissonant vibration in the grand symphony of the biosphere. Perhaps we are not the first verse, nor the last. Merely the latest stanza in the song of self-awareness that the planet sings to the universe. We often imagine ourselves as the storytellers of the Earth. But what if it is the other way around? What if the planet is the storyteller, and we are the words? Brief, luminous, spoken into being, and then absorbed back into the silence from which we came. Every eruption, every glacial cycle, every evolutionary leap is another phrase in that cosmic narration. And just as ink cannot know the page it rests upon, so too do we struggle to comprehend the consciousness of the world that carries us. Yet if we could translate its memory, the tectonic rumble, the magnetic pulse, the quiet drift of isotopes, perhaps we would find a single refrain repeated through eons. Everything that rises must one day return. Everything that forgets will one day remember. The idea is humbling and haunting, because if intelligence has emerged more than once, it suggests a pattern, a cycle. Perhaps consciousness is not a cosmic accident, but a property of worlds like ours, an inevitable flowering that comes and goes as naturally as spring and winter. And if so, then our destiny is not unique. We are participating in a rhythm that long predates us. Creation, curiosity, consumption, collapse, the planetary heartbeat of civilization. Each age begins in wonder, peaks in power, and ends in silence. And from that silence, life rises again, altered, remembering faintly what it once knew. We call it progress. The earth calls it recurrence. Look at any cross-section of rock and you are looking at eternity in motion. There is the memory of volcanic fire cooled into basalt. There the memory of ancient seas compressed into limestone. There the memory of forests turned to coal. The breath of long-dead trees trapped as fuel for future flames. Now imagine a future geologist, millions of years hence, slicing through our layer, the Anthropocene. What will they see? A surge in carbon dioxide, a sudden bloom of synthetic compounds, a flash of radioactivity. They will not find cities or bones or monuments. They will find a chemical chord, the sound of a species that burned bright and brief. They will know we existed not by our art, but by our imbalance. And perhaps, in that realization, they will also recognize themselves. For what if they too are another cycle's inheritors, another awakening, another civilization born from the ashes of ours? They will study our layer, our error, our wonder, and they will wonder in turn, were they the first? Were we the last? The planet will say nothing. It never does. It only listens, records, waits. There is a strange comfort in this cosmic indifference, because it means that even when we are gone, we will still exist, as chemistry, as dust, as a faint alteration in the world's long memory. Our story will become a line in the song of oxygen and stone, a brief modulation before the melody returns to its eternal theme. We fear being forgotten, but perhaps forgetting is the only way the earth remembers. Through erasure, it preserves. Through destruction, it renews. Through silence, it speaks. Sometimes I imagine the earth as a vast, ancient mind, not conscious in the human sense, but aware, continuous, infinite in patience. Its thoughts are mountains. Its dreams are oceans. Its memories flow through rivers of magma and veins of crystal. Every extinction is a sigh. Every new spring is an exhale. It has seen empires rise from its soil and return to dust. And still it spins, untroubled, unbroken, carrying the memory of everything upon its back. When we drill, dig, build, and measure, we are not exploring a foreign body. We are reading ourselves. We are made of this memory, shaped by it, dependent upon it. And perhaps the true wisdom of our species lies not in conquering the planet, but in learning to listen to it, to hear what it has been trying to tell us since long before we had words. Because the earth is not merely the stage upon which civilization unfolds. It is both stage and actor, author and audience, witness and participant. It has seen the beginning and the end of countless worlds, and will see ours too. But to the planet, there are no beginnings and endings, only cycles of remembrance. It forgets to remember, remembers to forget, and through that rhythm, life continues. Maybe that's why the chemical scars of ancient extinctions resemble the ones we're making now. Maybe we are not unique in our excess. Maybe we are simply reliving an ancient refrain, the verse of overreach, the chorus of collapse. Each time the melody changes, but the harmony remains. And every civilization, whether reptilian, mammalian, or human, eventually learns the same lesson. The earth does not belong to you. You belong to the earth. When the fossil record of our species is complete, when all that's left is a thin film of carbon and the faint echo of our atoms, perhaps the planet will do what it has always done. Close the book, turn the page, and begin again. Somewhere, life will return. Somewhere, curiosity will spark, and the cycle of awareness will rise anew. We call that tragedy. The earth calls it continuity. So the story comes full circle, from the floods that reshaped our myths, to the stones that remember the stars, to the chemistry that remembers us. Every chapter leads here, to the realization that the planet itself is the only witness that never dies. It does not grieve our passing, it simply absorbs it, transmuting memory into matter, matter into new life. And in that sense, we are immortal. Not as individuals, not even as civilizations, but as participants in the endless conversation between life and planet, energy and time. If the earth could speak, I think it would say something like this: I have seen you before. You rise, you shine, you vanish. You call yourselves the first, but you are not. You call yourselves the last, but you won't be. You are my thought, my dream, my reflection. When you are gone, I will dream again. And the planet turns, slow, ancient, eternal, carrying all that has ever been and all that will ever be within the silence of its memory. Part 12. When myth becomes data. For most of human history, we have treated myth and science as opposites, one poetic, the other precise, one born of wonder, the other of reason. But perhaps they are not rivals at all. Perhaps they are simply different dialects of the same language. The language of memory. Because what we now call myth may once have been data, and what we call science may simply be our latest attempt to remember what the earth has been saying all along. Across the world, the oldest stories we know are not about gods or kings. They are about disaster. Floods, fire, falling stars, mountains that bled, seas that swallowed the land. They are not mere imagination. They are records. And as modern geology, archaeology, and climatology advance, something extraordinary is happening. The stories are being proven true. When science finally learns to listen to myth, it discovers history hidden within poetry. In the Aboriginal traditions of Australia, elders still tell of a time when the ocean rose and devoured the coasts. When the great saltwater advanced inland, drowning sacred plains. For generations, anthropologists dismissed these as metaphor, but new research has mapped those stories against sea level data and found they align almost perfectly with coastlines that disappeared 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. These oral traditions, passed down through thousands of years of song and ceremony, have preserved the memory of real geological change. To dismiss them as fable is not just arrogance, it is blindness, because in their rhythm, in their imagery, lies something science struggles to achieve: continuity. The same pattern repeats across the world. In the Pacific, Polynesian tales speak of islands that sank into the sea. In the Mediterranean, Greek myth remembers Atlantis, a radiant land swallowed by waves. In the Near East, the Epic of Gilgamesh describes a deluge that cleansed the earth, a story echoed almost verbatim in the Book of Genesis, in the Indian tale of Manu, and in the legends of the Americas. For centuries, these were seen as moral allegories. Then geology revealed that around 12,800 years ago, the world did indeed flood. As the glaciers melted, as rivers overflowed, as oceans rose over 100 meters. What myth called divine punishment, science calls the Younger Dryas meltwater pulse. Different vocabulary, same memory. The myths had been right, just spoken in metaphor instead of measurement. Even the stories of fire align. In ancient Indonesia and Polynesia, people spoke of mountains that exploded and skies that turned black for years. They described sunsets the color of blood and seasons without harvest. To them, these were acts of the gods. But when scientists drilled ice cores in Greenland and Antarctica, they found layers of volcanic ash, microscopic glass fragments that matched the chemical fingerprint of eruptions like Toba, Tambora, and Krakatoa. The legends were eyewitness reports, compressed into song. And in South America, the myths of the Andean peoples tell of a sun that hid for generations, the memory of a volcanic winter. Once again, story and sediment sing the same tune. What we are discovering is that myth is not primitive science. It is compressed knowledge, data encoded in narrative, stored in rhythm, imagery, and ritual. It is the Earth's hard drive, written not in binary but in metaphor. While stone and ice record the planet's physical changes, myth records its emotional truth, how those changes felt to the human heart. The roar of the volcano becomes the voice of a god. The flood becomes judgment. The dawn after becomes rebirth. In this way, myth preserves not only what happened, but why it mattered. Modern science can tell us when the sea rose, how much, and how fast. But only myth can tell us what it meant. The terror of watching one's homeland disappear, the awe of survival, the gratitude that followed. Science measures the event. Myth measures the experience. And between them lies a truth more complete than either alone. Consider how memory itself works. Our brains do not store perfect data. They store patterns, images, emotions, compressed fragments of truth that can survive retelling. Myth works the same way. It is collective memory, shaped by generations, resilient to detail but faithful to essence. When the story of a flood survives 10,000 years, it is not because the details are exact, but because the event was unforgettable. Myth, in other words, is a survival technology, not of tools, but of understanding. It allows memory to cross the boundaries of time. Perhaps this is why so many ancient myths focus not on beginnings but on returns. They speak of cycles, of worlds that rise and fall, of suns that die and are reborn. These are not coincidences. They are the psychological imprint of the planet's own rhythms. The ancients watched the sky and the land and realized everything repeats. Flood follows fire, destruction follows arrogance, rebirth follows ruin. And so they encoded this pattern in story to remind their descendants what the earth itself had already learned. But somewhere along the way, we forgot how to listen. We divided myth from fact, symbol from science. We began to believe that truth must always be measurable, that only what can be weighed, dated, and graphed is real. And in doing so, we lost half of our memory, because the earth's testimony is not always numerical. Sometimes it is poetic. Sometimes it hides in the lullabies of the ancients, in the chants of shamans, in the geometry of temples. Sometimes it is encoded not in carbon, but in metaphor. Today, our scientists decode the planet's archives with satellites and spectrometers. But the elders, the storytellers, the dreamers, they have been decoding it all along, through intuition, ritual, and the continuity of oral tradition. They did not measure the world, they remembered it. They did not calculate harmony, they lived it. The great mistake of modernity is to see this as ignorance. In truth, it is wisdom, the kind that measures time not in years but in meaning. Imagine a world where the two forms of knowledge, mythic and scientific, meet again, where the astronomer consults the storyteller, the geologist listens to the elder, and the archaeologist reads the stars as the ancients did. We would no longer ask whether myth is true, but what kind of truth it contains. We would see that every legend is a map, a data set translated into emotion, a survival guide disguised as wonder. And perhaps by reuniting these two ways of knowing, we would finally understand not just what happened to the world, but what the world is trying to tell us. The earth, after all, has always spoken through human voices. The songs of the Aboriginal Dreamtime, the hymns of Egypt, the chants of the Maya, the sagas of the Norse, each one is the planet remembering itself through us. When we tell stories of fire, of flood, of rebirth, we are not inventing myth. We are participating in the Earth's own act of recall. We are how the planet remembers. And so, myth and science are not two paths that diverged, but two branches of the same tree, one rooted in logic, the other in imagination. Both reach for light. Both seek to understand the same mystery. How does the universe remember itself? Perhaps myth is the dream of science, and science is the awakening of myth. Together, they form a circle. Intuition becoming evidence, evidence becoming meaning. The same cycle that has guided humanity since the first storyteller looked at the stars and saw in them a mirror of the soul. When myth becomes data and data becomes story, we arrive not at proof, but at understanding. The ancients did not need laboratories to know they were part of something infinite. They listened. To the wind, to the ocean, to the trembling of the earth beneath their feet. And what they heard became the stories we still tell today. Those stories are not superstition. They are compressed memory, encrypted in language, preserved in ritual, passed down like genetic code. They are the software of the human soul, running quietly in the background of civilization. So as science drills into the ice, and myth continues to echo in song, perhaps the two are drawing closer again, the left and right hands of the same intelligence. Because what we truly seek is not evidence, but connection. The understanding that everything we measure was once felt, and everything we feel can one day be measured. When that moment comes, when the satellite and the shaman speak the same truth, we will remember what our ancestors already knew. The earth does not just host life, it tells it, through rock and rhythm, through data and dream, through us. Part 13. The bridge between science and myth. Science seeks evidence, myth seeks meaning. For centuries we've been told these two paths lead in opposite directions, one to fact, the other to faith. But when you follow them far enough, something remarkable happens. They meet, completing the circle. The further we advance into the frontiers of discovery, decoding genomes, drilling into ancient ice, mapping galaxies, the more our data begins to sound like stories. The more we understand about time, consciousness, and the cosmos, the more we hear the faint echo of something older, whispering through it all. The same awe, the same questions, the same memory. Perhaps the scientist and the storyteller were never enemies. Perhaps they have always been two halves of the same mind. One asking how, the other asking why. For thousands of years, humanity has built its identity on this divide. The Age of Reason told us to abandon myth, to trade wonder for certainty. But the further science looks into the fabric of reality, into quantum fields, dark matter, the strange self-organization of life, the more it begins to resemble poetry. The language becomes metaphoric, waves that are particles, matter that remembers, time that bends. The universe, once thought mechanical, now behaves like myth itself, paradoxical, mysterious, alive. And so we find ourselves returning to an ancient truth, that knowledge is not a ladder climbing away from the sacred, but a circle returning to it. Atlantis, Lemuria, the Golden Age. For centuries, these names have haunted our imagination, shimmering between legend and lost history. To scientists, they are cautionary tales of pseudoscience. To dreamers, they are memories of paradise. But what if both are right? What if these places were never meant to be found on a map? What if they are symbols, mythic metaphors for cycles of rise and fall, for the fragile brilliance of every civilization that has ever walked the earth? When we strip away the geography, what remains is a universal pattern. A people who grow wise and powerful. A world that flourishes. A fall through arrogance, imbalance, or catastrophe. And a few survivors who carry fragments of knowledge into the next dawn. That story belongs to Atlantis, to Sumer, to us. It is not about where it happened, it is about how it always happens. In that sense, myth is not the opposite of science. It is science remembered emotionally. It encodes observation through symbol, experience through image. When the ancients described gods descending from the stars or continents swallowed by sea, they were not merely inventing fantasy. They were compressing data into story, distilling complex truths about the planet and the cosmos into language that the human heart could keep alive. And when science decodes myth, when geology confirms the flood, when archaeology finds the buried city, it is not disproving the story. It is simply unfolding it, translating memory from metaphor into measurement. Look closely, and the bridge between science and myth is already built, not in stone but in pattern. Everywhere the same symbols repeat: the circle, the spiral, the serpent eating its tail. In myth, they represent eternity. In physics, they describe the geometry of the universe, orbits, vortices, self-similar fractals. The ancients carved them into temples. Scientists now see them in galaxies and DNA. Both are glimpsing the same design, one through mathematics, the other through metaphor. It is not coincidence. It is continuity. Science explains the mechanics of life. Myth explains its purpose. The first tells us how the stars burn. The second tells us why they matter. Together, they form the full truth. Reason illuminated by wonder, wonder grounded by reason. Without one, the other collapses into blindness. Science without myth becomes arrogance. Myth without science becomes superstition. But together they restore what both have always sought: understanding. As we re-examine ancient legends with new tools, the lines blur further. Satellite imaging reveals lost riverbeds beneath the Sahara, matching old stories of lush kingdoms swallowed by sand. Ground-penetrating radar finds hidden temples in Cambodia, confirming myths once thought imaginary. In the Himalayas, oral traditions of fire from the sky correspond to evidence of ancient meteor impacts. In Australia, songlines trace coastlines that existed before the seas rose. The myths remember what geology only just rediscovers, and in those rediscoveries something profound emerges. The past is not dead. It is encoded. The earth remembers through chemistry, and humanity remembers through story. Together, they form one archive, one voice, one continuous record of what it means to live on this planet. When I listen to elders recount their creation songs, or to physicists describe the birth of the universe, I hear the same tone, reverence, the same acceptance that we are participants in a mystery too vast to fully know. The difference lies only in expression. One uses ritual, the other equation. But both kneel before the same truth, that existence itself is sacred. Perhaps that is what our ancestors meant by the word, not speech but pattern, resonance, the creative vibration that underlies both language and law. Science measures that vibration, myth gives it meaning, and we, standing between them, translate it into experience. The philosopher once said, "The universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it is stranger than we can imagine." But maybe imagination is precisely the tool nature gave us to bridge that gap, to sense patterns too complex for numbers alone. The myth maker's vision and the scientist's experiment are both acts of translation, attempts to render the infinite into the comprehensible. Both are forms of remembering, each incomplete without the other. When we see them as opposites, we fracture our own intelligence. When we reunite them, we remember who we are, not conquerors of nature, but interpreters of it. If there is a message encoded in the myths of lost civilizations, perhaps it is not about technology or power, but about balance. Atlantis was not destroyed because it was advanced, but because it forgot harmony. It represents the eternal warning of progress divorced from wisdom. In that sense, Atlantis is not a place at all. It is a mirror. And when we look into it, we see ourselves. Lemuria, Shambhala, the Golden Age, all these names point to the same truth, that there was a time, and there will be a time again, when knowledge and meaning were one. When science was sacred, when every act of understanding was also an act of reverence. That memory lives inside us still. It waits for reunion. The bridge between science and myth is not built by belief, it is built by curiosity. By asking not just, is it true, but what truth is it trying to tell? When we read a myth as literal fact, we shrink it. When we dismiss it as fantasy, we silence it. But when we read it as memory encoded in metaphor, we awaken it. We realize that the ancients were not naive dreamers. They were the first scientists, the first philosophers, the first historians of the earth. Their laboratories were the sky. Their archives were the stones. Their equations were sung around fires. And though their language was different, their pursuit was the same, to understand where we come from and why we are here. Perhaps that is what the earth has been trying to teach us through both myth and science, that memory is not about the past, but about relationship. The relationship between humanity and the planet, between reason and imagination, between knowledge and humility. To remember is not to look backward, it is to realign, to rediscover our place in the circle. Because when science and myth finally meet, the world becomes whole again. The data gains soul, the story gains structure, and the human mind, long divided, begins to remember its unity with everything it studies. So maybe the final question is not, did Atlantis exist? Maybe it is, what part of us still lives there? Maybe the flood did not destroy a continent, but a consciousness, the awareness that everything we learn, we once knew. The bridge we seek between science and myth is not out there, among ruins or stars. It is within us, in the way we think, feel, and dream. We are the descendants of both the scientist and the storyteller. Our task now is not to choose between them, but to let them speak together. And when they do, when the language of equations meets the rhythm of myth, the circle closes. The world remembers itself. And through that reunion, we realize what perhaps the ancients always knew. The universe is not asking to be explained. It is asking to be remembered. Part 14. The Message of the Ancient Architects. If a civilization knew it was about to end, what message would it leave behind? Not a book, words decay. Not a machine, metal corrodes. But perhaps a shape, something eternal, something the planet itself could remember. And so they built. Stone by stone, line by line, they wrote their farewell in the only language the cosmos could never forget: geometry. Across deserts and jungles, mountains and islands, their message still stands, silent, monumental, immovable. The Great Pyramid pointing to true north. Stone circles that catch the sunrise of the solstice with flawless precision. Temples whose shadows mark the equinox to the exact moment of balance. Numbers that repeat: 3, 9, 432, 2160, the same ratios found in planetary motion and musical harmony. Angles that mirror the tilt of the earth, the arc of the moon, the precession of the stars. These were not accidents of superstition. They were intentions, deliberate acts of communication written in stone and sunlight. Each monument is a word, each alignment a sentence, and together they form a message older than memory. We understood this. We knew our place in the universe, and we wanted you to remember. When we look upon the ruins of Giza, of Stonehenge, of Teotihuacan, we are not looking at relics of ignorance. We are looking at archives. They are the original golden records, launched not into space but into time. Just as Voyager carries a disk of sound and symbols for whoever might find it among the stars, so too did the ancient architects leave their knowledge encoded for the future, not in fragile language, but in form. They knew that matter can perish, but proportion endures. That even when dynasties fade and continents sink, the relationship between a circle and its diameter, between the earth and the sky, remains the same. To build in proportion was to build in eternity. Consider the Great Pyramid again. Its sides are aligned within a fraction of a degree to the true cardinal directions, a feat we struggle to reproduce today, even with satellites. Its proportions encode pi and phi, the golden ratio, constants that govern everything from the spiral of galaxies to the shape of seashells. Was it coincidence? Or was it their way of saying, we knew the code? In England, the builders of Stonehenge aligned their massive stones so that on midsummer morning the sun rises exactly above the heelstone. The monument itself becomes a clock, not mechanical, but cosmic, measuring time not by gears, but by the heartbeat of the planet. And in Peru, at Machu Picchu, the Temple of the Sun frames the winter solstice sunrise with flawless geometry. Each window, each shadow, a precise calibration of the heavens. Across every culture, the same pattern: geometry as prayer, architecture as message. But what were they trying to say? Perhaps it was not a warning, but a reminder. That civilizations rise and fall, but harmony endures. That knowledge divorced from reverence leads to ruin. That the true measure of progress is not power, but alignment, with earth, with sky, with time itself. They did not write manuals or manifestos because they understood. Languages die, but mathematics does not. Ratios, angles, and alignments are universal syntax, readable by any mind that seeks order in chaos. To carve meaning into stone through geometry was to speak directly to consciousness, bypassing translation. In that sense, every pyramid, every temple, every stone ring is both a monument and a mirror. It reflects what they knew and what we have forgotten. We often call them primitive. But primitive minds do not build structures that survive 10,000 years. They do not encode celestial cycles with precision that rivals atomic clocks. They do not align stone and starlight so perfectly that, even now, millennia later, the sunrise still falls exactly where they intended. No, these were engineers of eternity. Their blueprints were not drawn on parchment but on the curvature of the earth. Their tools were patience, intuition, and the humility to listen to the planet's geometry rather than impose their own. They may have lacked our machines, but they possessed something we are losing: a sympathy with the cosmos, an awareness that to build well was to build in resonance with the heartbeat of creation. To them, geometry was not abstract mathematics. It was spiritual grammar. The circle symbolized the heavens, the square the earth. To unite them, to draw the circle within the square, was to reconcile heaven and earth, matter and spirit, time and eternity. This sacred geometry appears everywhere, in the mandalas of the East, in the floor plans of Gothic cathedrals, in the Mayan calendar, in Leonardo's Vitruvian Man. It is a visual theology, a map of harmony that transcends culture and era. It says simply, there is an order, and you are part of it. Imagine them, those ancient architects, standing on the edge of a world they knew was ending. Their sky perhaps darkened by ash or flood or the slow approach of time's erasure. They must have known their names would be lost, their language forgotten, and yet they built anyway, not for glory but for continuity. Their work was not despair, it was hope, the hope that someday someone would look upon their stones and remember. That even if all else perished, the pattern would endure. And now, thousands of years later, here we are, reading their geometry like archaeologists of meaning, deciphering ratios as if they were letters from deep time. We have become the very audience they were building for. When we decode these alignments, we find not superstition but wisdom, the understanding that the universe is not random, but relational. That matter vibrates to mathematical ratios, that harmony is woven into reality itself. The ancients knew this instinctively. We are rediscovering it through quantum physics and cosmology. They carved 5 into stone. We find it in the DNA helix. They aligned pyramids to the stars. We map galaxies that spiral in the same proportions. Different eras, same insight. The universe speaks through number. Perhaps that was their true message, that knowledge and meaning are one, that to understand the cosmos is to be in dialogue with it. Their monuments are not simply reminders of what they built, but invitations to think as they thought, in harmony. In harmony. In many ways, these structures are the earliest form of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Only this time the signal is terrestrial. Instead of sending radio waves into space, they sent geometry forward through time. Instead of a metal disc on Voyager, they carved a planetary message into stone saying, "We were here. We understood. We built with purpose." And now we, the inheritors of their world, are the ones receiving that transmission. Decoding their message after 10,000 years of silence. Their language was not words, but alignment. It humbles me to realize that, in a way, every generation that rediscovers these monuments becomes part of the message itself. We extend the chain of remembrance. The pyramid was built once, but it is rebuilt every time someone stands before it and wonders, how did they do this? Why? Each question reawakens the ancient intention to remember. This is how civilizations speak across extinction, through design that endures longer than empire. The builders understood that architecture could become archaeology, and archaeology could become revelation. To them, geometry was immortality. And so the pattern continues. Stone by stone, ratio by ratio, the message repeats through Egypt, Sumer, Angkor, Tiahuanaco, and beyond. Each civilization inherits a fragment, modifies it, passes it on. Perhaps that is the deeper purpose of culture itself, to transmit understanding across the abyss of time. Not through blood or lineage, but through form. Through the quiet persistence of proportion. In the end, all of this, the temples, the pyramids, the cosmic alignments, may come down to a single human act, the desire to be understood, to tell the future, we were here, we knew something, please remember. It is the same desire that sent the Voyager golden record into the void, carrying greetings in 55 languages, music from every continent, and a map of our place among the stars. The ancients did the same, but with limestone and granite. Their monuments are Voyager's twin, orbiting not the sun but time itself. And perhaps, just as we once looked upward for answers, they looked forward, knowing that one day we would look back. So when you stand before those timeless stones, at Giza, at Machu Picchu, at Stonehenge, understand this. You are not looking at ruins. You are reading a letter written not in ink, but in eternity. A message from the ancients to the unborn, saying, we knew, we remembered, and we hoped you would too. Part 15, The Eternal Flow. The story ends in silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of understanding. A stillness that comes when all the searching, all the digging, all the decoding leads not outward, but inward. After every question, after every discovery, the earth itself remains the only voice that endures, and it whispers, as it has whispered since the beginning, remember. We tend to think of civilization as a creation, something new, something we've built from nothing. But perhaps it is not invention at all. Perhaps civilization is remembrance. Each age is not the start of something new, but the continuation of something old, a long, slow recollection. The earth remembers itself through us. And every time we rediscover geometry, rediscover harmony, rediscover awe, we are simply recalling what has always been known. Humanity, then, is not the author of progress. We are the medium through which the planet dreams. We are its neural spark, its voice-given form. When we build, we are not conquering nature. We are completing it. The ancients may have understood this far better than we do. They did not see technology as domination, but as collaboration. Their science was sacred because it served balance, not control. They measured the stars not to own them, but to align with them. Their machines were made of stone and sunlight, shadow and sound. Their technology was harmony. Today we call that philosophy primitive. But perhaps it was the most advanced understanding ever achieved. That true intelligence does not rise above nature, but moves in rhythm with it. The engineers of the first age did not build skyscrapers, they built relationships. Their architecture resonated with wind and water, their calendars with solstice and tide. Even their myths carried within them a code of equilibrium, the awareness that life thrives only when it dances in step with the planet's pulse. We have forgotten that rhythm, but the ruins remember. Every monument, every legend, every layer of soil is of one continuous text, the epic poem of the earth itself. The verses are written in basalt and coral, in carbon and quartz, in myth and mathematics. We have been reading it unknowingly, generation after generation, through every act of wonder and curiosity. Each excavation, each discovery, each moment of awe is another word reawakened in the song. The planet is not a stage for our civilization. It is the storyteller, and we are part of its language. In this light, progress and decay are not opposites, they are phases of the same eternal flow. Civilizations rise, bloom, fade, and return, like tides upon a cosmic shore. Each thinks itself the first, each believes it will last forever. Yet the pattern endures, repeating softly beneath the surface of history. Creation, flourish, forgetting, and then remembering again. If we listen carefully, we can almost hear the rhythm, a heartbeat of stone and fire repeating across epochs. The fall of Atlantis, the rise of Egypt, the silence of Göbekli Tepe, the roar of our modern cities, all verses of the same recurring song. Not progress, not failure, but remembrance. When the ice returns, and it will, our monuments too will vanish. Our satellites will fall, our data will dissolve into dust. The memory of us will fade from language and map, leaving behind only a thin layer of carbon, a subtle imbalance in the isotopes, another verse in the planet's long poem. And yet, something will survive. Perhaps a future species or a new intelligence will rise and feel the same wonder we feel now, standing before the ruins of another age. They will ask the same questions. Who were they? What did they know? And in that act of asking, the circle will begin again. Through curiosity, the earth will remember itself once more. Time is not a line, but a tide. It ebbs and flows, it carries knowledge away, then brings it back reshaped, renewed. Every generation is a shoreline between forgetting and remembering. We build our monuments, we tell our stories, and when they are gone, their echoes remain, waiting for the next tide to uncover them. This is not tragedy. It is design. The universe renews itself through memory, not permanence. Somewhere deep beneath our feet, the echoes of the first builders still hum. A vibration in the stone, a mathematical rhythm that our hearts still recognize. It calls to us, quietly, through symmetry, through pattern, through beauty. That is why the sight of the pyramids moves us. Why the alignment of a solstice still fills us with awe. Why the spiral of a shell feels familiar. Because we have seen it all before. Not in history books, but in the DNA of memory itself. We are not discovering the ancient world. We are remembering ourselves. In the end, this is the lesson of deep time. That knowledge is not accumulated, it is recalled. That we are not the pinnacle of creation, but one more verse in an infinite melody. That everything we seek to understand, the ancients once understood too, perhaps in a different way, but with the same reverence. They left us their message, not to glorify themselves, but to remind us, you are part of this. You belong to the rhythm. You are the memory of the world, made flesh. And so the story closes where it began, in wonder. The same stars that watched over the first builders still watch over us. The same tides that erased their cities lap quietly against our own. The same question lingers in the silence. How many times has this happened before? Maybe history is not a march forward, but a circle turning. A dream the earth dreams again and again until we finally awaken to what it's been saying all along. You are not separate from me. You are my thought, my breath, my memory. As night falls over the pyramids, the temples, the mountains, and the seas, the light fades, but not the message. It moves through us now, through our voices, through the stories we tell and the questions we ask. The ancient architects spoke through stone. We speak through signal, but the impulse is the same. To send something forward through time, something true. And so, as the stars return to their eternal positions, the earth continues its whisper, patient and timeless across oceans, through atoms, into us. We were here. We will be here again.